Hello, I'm Parker Hadley, and this is my final presentation on the alternate history of a video game company. So let's go ahead and get into it. So the company I'll be focusing on for this presentation is Sega, and Sega was officially founded on June 3rd, 1960 in Japan. The company was established to take over the business activities of Service Games of Japan, which was a firm that imported and operated coin-operated amusement. So a lot of like arcade machines and things of that nature. In 1964, the company merged with Nihon Kiki Saizo, apologies if I'm pronouncing that incorrectly, to form the foundation of modern Sega. It was founded by Martin Bromley and Richard Stewart with David Rosen's company, Rosen Enterprises. Rosen was an American businessman who eventually became the CEO of the new company, which can also be known as like Sega Sammy in modern times and things like that. Sega's main global headquarters is located in Tokyo, Japan, which serves as the hub for Sega's corporation. But there are also other key regional offices as well. There's Sega of America, located in Irvine, California, and Sega Europe, located in Brentford, London. The current market status for Sega is it's currently viewed as a stabilized recovery. While the company isn't exactly thriving currently, their core brands like Sonic the Hedgehog and Persona are performing very well in modern times. Significant financial headwinds from recent acquisitions and challenging mobile market have pressured its bottom line. A lot of revenue from licensing has roughly doubled recently thanks to the success of the Sonic the Hedgehog movies and the Like a Dragon TV series. Sega has created a transmedia growth engine that extends far beyond traditional gaming. And I would say, honestly, that's where Sega is really succeeding the most right now. Recently, their games have been doing pretty good, but a big chunk of their revenue comes from all their other transmedia movies and films and things like that. Sega currently has a market cap around 2.8 to 3 billion, while the company faces challenges with a 50, I'm sorry, 54.6% drop in operating income and recent stock price declines due to the reduce of 2025 releases and high Ravio acquisition costs. The company remains stable through its top IPs with over 20 million copies sold for its top franchises. Despite stable core operation, Sega expects a net loss over the 2026 year due to on and off costs. Again, Sega thrives in brand recognition, but they do struggle financially with high costs of recent expansions and just the unpredictability of the mobile gaming market. They had just a huge acquisition that was Revio, like I said, that cost a lot, and they've been really trying to revamp their global market with different mobile games like Sonic Rumble and things like that. But they're still trying to figure that out, and they haven't exactly made a net profit back from that. And analysts are cautiously optimistic, believing that within the next 3 years, Sega will return significant profitability as they restructure their mobile strategy and double down on their proven IPs. And just being a Sega fan, I can say there was a lack of game releases in 2025. And I hope that just means they're working really hard on the games they are developing so that analytics would be right in the next 3 years, that they can make a profit and kind of turn out of this uh, stabilized recovery. Sorry, that's the word I was looking for, that they're currently sitting in right now. Products and business models for Sega. Their business model centers on utilizing strong IPs to generate revenue through digital and physical game sales. While they no longer produce their own consoles, they have had several released in the past, those being the SG-1000 and SG-3000 in 1983, the Sega Master System in 1985, the Sega Genesis and Game Gear in 1989, the Sega Saturn in 1995, and the Sega Dreamcast in 1999. They now focus on distributing games globally as a software-only publisher, with titles that release on other companies' consoles or platforms like Xbox or PlayStation 5, which is a strategy they've used since the early 2000s. They have games across all platforms like console, PC, mobile, and arcade machines. Yeah, like they don't make their own consoles anymore, which is unfortunate. Um, but their IPs and games still come out across all platforms. Sega has a global expansion to manage international localization. The company makes profits through console and PC games and mobile games, like I previously said, amusement arcades and toys or merchandise, which actually is a huge aspect for their company, and animation and IP licensing. And these broader categories of making revenue can have different models within them. Like a lot of their mobile games have microtransactions or subscriptions, and a lot of their current games have DLC content. Um, but these models can change depending on what revenue model you're looking at. Sega's main competitors today are major video game publishers and developers. Some of those including Nintendo, Capcom, Sony, Microsoft, EA, and Bandai Namco. As a third-party developer slash publisher, Sega competes in the global market. And the competition has shifted from console hardware back in 2001 to providing software for existing platforms. And their key competitors are also focused on both console, PC, and mobile games and arcade entertainment. So a lot of the same aspects. The only difference is they really don't produce their own consoles. So, some real history on Sega. As I stated previously, it was founded in 1960, and they started out just by making arcade machines, which were a huge part of the gaming industry in the 70s and 80s. And after they merged with Rosen Enterprises and made Sega Enterprises or Sega Sammy, either or, it wasn't until the early 90s when the company really took off and got their time in the spotlight. With the release of the Sega Genesis and Sonic the Hedgehog, Sega directly competed against Nintendo and their golden child Super Mario in the console wars back in the 80s. Sega marketed their games and products as a more edgy and mature brand compared to others, and this was easily achievable with their new mascot, Sonic the Hedgehog, who was portrayed as a faster and cooler version of Mario. They also had marketing strategies like Genesis does what Nintendo don't, which I think is so awesome, by the way, that helped them directly compete with video game company Titan that was Nintendo. And this graphic I have is an actual advertisement they used, which they actually brought back here recently in an ad for their new Sonic Racing Crossworlds game. They brought back this exact kind of slogan, which I thought was really, really cool. Things eventually started to go downhill for Sega in the mid 1990s, though. When their new console, the Sega Saturn, came out, or in development, it was really difficult for developers to work with and eventually caused many third-party companies to shift towards Sony's PlayStation instead. Sega continued to compete and produce consoles through the 90s until they released their final console, the Dreamcast. The Sega Dreamcast was extremely innovative for its time and even included built-in online capabilities, but unfortunately, these capabilities weren't enough to compete with the hype surrounding Sony's PlayStation 2, which offered a built-in DVD player, which was a big deal at the time. The mix of the hype around the PS2, third-party support loss, piracy issues, and financial instability from the uh, Sega Saturn sales caused the console to not sell well enough to compete. And people often say that the Dreamcast was too early for its time and faced significant market pressure. And these failures caused Sega to exit the console market in 2001 and shifted to become a third-party publisher, which is what they still are today. But what if those hardware limitations or other failures never happen? This is where we get into the fun part, where this is my alternate timeline or history for Sega with three crucial changes that I would have made to really change the course of their timeline throughout history. So the first alternate history event is the Sega Saturn successes, or just success in general. I'm sorry. The first key event that I'd like to change for Sega in this theoretical timeline would be that Sega fixes and improves the hardware for the Sega Saturn, leading the console to being a success that helps the company and rather than hurt it, like what actually did happen, unfortunately. In this new timeline, Sega goes back and redesigns the hardware for the Sega Saturn, making development easier for Sega and other third-party companies. With this hardware redesign, company parties wouldn't have left their partnership with Sega for Sony, meaning there would have been a lot more third-party games available on the Saturn, and would have allowed Sega to compete with Sony more evenly or fairly. This also would have prevented Sega from dealing with financial instability because of the Sega Saturn, rather than cause Sega to be more financially stable when creating and developing the Dreamcast and other projects, giving them a better chance at being more successful than they were. And this was a fun article I found on Reddit where some fans were actually discussing, what if the Sega Saturn was a major success? Because this can be viewed as Sega's first kind of real failure, if you will, and just not having support from third-party companies, and already being at a financial loss, when working on new companies or working on new consoles to compete with companies like the PS2, just kind of set them up for failure uh, from the jump. So the first change, of course, I would make would be for this to be a huge success, kind of setting the tone for the rest of their timeline. The second alternate history event I would change would the Dreamcast becomes a hit and wins their console generation. Yeah, having the Dreamcast lead all console sales at the time, becoming the most successful console of its generation, and allowing Sega to continue to produce consoles in the future and never have to drop out of the console market. This event would be possible due to the first event I changed. Of course, you'd need the Saturn to be successful in order for the Dreamcast to succeed. But following the success of the Sega Saturn, they would have more support from publishers and fans since their reputation wasn't damaged from previous console failures. Because after the Sega Saturn, Sega had a pretty rough reputation that not a lot of people were intrigued by, if you will. And this would have allowed them to truly compete with Sony and their PlayStation 2 when it released. And while yes, the PS2 had built-in DVD player, Sega could have directly advertised against Sony with their advertising being done in the same way that they had previously done with Nintendo, kind of calling out Sony on their flaws and different aspects like that, like they did with the Genesis does what Nintendo don't. Their main marketing campaign could focus on the Dreamcast online multiplayer capabilities, which were brand new at the time. Sega could have also had edgy slogans that matched their reputation, calling out Sony. These slogans could have called out the fact that Sony was only adding something that already existed, being the DVD player, into their console, while Sega was shooting for something that had never been done before, and it being its online multiplayer. This would help Sega succeed commercially and promote their new innovative console better than ever. Sega also wouldn't have had to do price cuts on the Dreamcast, helping them make more of a profit and better compete with their competitors. With this marketing success, built-in online multiplayer abilities and online gaming would have become mainstream way earlier on. This would be a massive hit amongst players and developers, leading to the Dreamcast being a huge success, beating out the PS2, which this sets up a bright future for Sega, starting with the Dreamcast being the beginning of Sega's very own global online network. And that kind of takes us right into the third thing that I would change, and that being Sega replaces Microsoft in the console market altogether. So again, continuing from the first two events I changed, in the early 2000s, Sega became the main competitor to Sony. Sega continues to work on and improve off the success of the Dreamcast and their global online network, eventually leading to Sega surpassing Sony in the console market. This would cause Microsoft to stay focused on PC and potentially never release the Xbox, since Sega would be dominating online console infrastructure, which was like one of the biggest features of the Xbox when it came out. And I believe one of the reasons why it was so successful. In a way, it would be as if in the current console market, Sega replaces Microsoft, it says leading, I'm sorry, that meant to say leading. Leaving the big three of the console market being Sega, Sony, and Nintendo. Everything that Microsoft has achieved in the online gaming space would have rather been achieved by Sega, making them one of the top companies, not just in the video game industry, but especially in the online gaming aspect of the industry. Sega would continue producing their own consoles, while also making exclusive games for their consoles with their popular IPs and supporting third-party company games for years to come. Most all of these games would have online multiplayer capabilities, and eventually, Sega would create their own online multiplayer system, kind of like Xbox Live, and subscription service like the Xbox Game Pass. and that all of their future titles would support and be a part of those passes and services. With Sega crushing Microsoft's chances of creating Xbox, Sega would have created the largest online gaming ecosystem that would help them compete with any competitor, leading them to be the top console company. So the current market status in this alternate timeline would be a lot different than it is today. Sega would be the number one console company after creating the largest online gaming ecosystem. Their consoles perform the best in sales compared to their competitors. Sega has continued to produce consoles in every console generation, and every time they are able to win that console generation confidently. Sega is currently thriving as their famous IPs have their very own home on their own consoles, and they wouldn't have to be released on competitors' consoles. Sega continues to grow in transmedia as they would still have their IPs in movies and TV shows, but even these would be more successful as more people would be more familiar with the IPs and trust where Sega puts them and how they are treated in those transmedia aspects. Sega doesn't only thrive in IP recognition, but in console and game sales as well, leading the company to grow in the mobile gaming market and all other aspects of the industry. Sega would have been dominating for decades, not just in IP recognition, but financially as well, with all their success, making them the leading console slash gaming company to this day. So some of the products in this new timeline, a lot of it would be the same as they currently have in the real timeline, those being games, merchandise, and IP licensing. The main difference or new products that would be their own line of consoles in this new timeline. With the Dreamcast being a success, that's not where their own consoles ended, but instead it just began. In every console generation, they would have released their own console to compete in the market. For example, after the Dreamcast, they could have released the Dreamcast X, which would be a newer, more innovative model of the Dreamcast. Because I know that the Dreamcast did have the online multiplayer capabilities. It was confusing to some, so they could have really worked out those issues and made it simpler and easier for everyone to use those online capabilities. Eventually, Sega would have produced a new line of Sega consoles called the Sega Storm or the Sega Surge, and these are just titles I came up with on my own. But these consoles would continue to grow and improve off their previous console's success. Each console generation would have a new console from Sega, giving us years of new Sega manufactured consoles, and each of those consoles would be the main platform their games produced on with their own IPs. So instead of Sonic games being released on the Nintendo Switch, they'd be released on their own Sega consoles. As well, they could be released on other consoles, but they'd really give Sega IPs a home instead of having to find a home, if that makes sense. With the success from these consoles, we would see even more brand deals and merchandise around Sega IPs, creating even more products by Sega than we have today in real time, or in the real timeline. Because I know there's tons of merchandise for so many Sega IPs, but I truly believe in this new timeline there'd be even more than there is now. Sega also would have cloud gaming platforms, online multiplayer services, and their own mobile ecosystem. Since one of the main focuses of the company is online gaming, these online gaming services would also be a product released to ensure that players have the best online gaming experience through Sega. They would also find ways to connect all of these services so the whole Sega Online community would have a great way to always stay connected online. And the revenue and business model in this new timeline would be pretty similar to what it is today, but with a bit more to it. Their current business model today is centered on utilizing strong IPs to generate revenue through digital and physical game sales. And in this new timeline, that would remain true, but in this new timeline, they would rework it to go something along the lines of centered around online multiplayer games within their consoles that utilize their strong IPs to generate revenue through console sales and digital and physical game sales. Sega would still use their strong IPs to help their success, but they wouldn't have to rely on them alone. With their new business model also focusing on them always having the best online gaming communities and abilities. Sega would create online services to ensure this, and that would be a huge part of their business model. Through different online multiplayer services and digital storefronts, they would make a majority of their money through that. They would even look into creating an online subscription service like Netflix, but for video games, to grow their online services even bigger. Sega's main focus in this new timeline would be their online gaming communities and services, with their strong IPs being right behind them um, in their new business model to just kind of help support and promote all their online abilities and services. So some of the competitors in the new timeline, a lot of it would remain the same because it's the same kind of space in the market. And those would be, of course, Sony, Nintendo, Capcom, EA, and a lot of the other ones I mentioned previously. But the main difference would be Microsoft isn't there or in the picture. The competitive scene would look different due to some of these companies could potentially be stronger, be weaker, or flat out not exist anymore, like Microsoft and the Xbox. Sony would still be a strong company, but be behind Sega, and Nintendo would still be the powerhouse that it is. But they aren't a direct competitor since they focus more on a niche and family-friendly content. And Sega's whole brand would still be a cooler, more edgy, mature version of Nintendo, like they started in the 90s. Sega would also gain a bit more competition from other online gaming companies, some of those being Tencent, NetEase, and EA. Those were just some of the biggest online companies I found within my research. But they wouldn't only have, again, competition from console companies, but also online gaming companies. But this is to be expected to have more competition when you are one of the best companies in these areas, which Sega definitely is in this timeline. Sega is a larger company in this alternate timeline, leading to more areas of competition since they are competing in several different market areas. Because right now they really only focus on distribution and game IPs to kind of carry them through in our real timeline. But in this timeline, they don't rely on anybody but themselves. They focus on them, their softwares, their online capabilities, and their own IPs to support them. So while yes, they would probably take on a bit more competition in the online gaming community, I believe throughout the years in this alternate timeline, they are strong enough and powerful enough um, within the markets to take on this extra competition from these other companies. So future plans for Sega in this alternate timeline consist of focusing on Sega manufactured console ecosystem that has full cross-platform capabilities, that being console, PC, and mobile. These consoles would aim to release more frequently than other consoles, providing players with new content and experiences all the time, and this will truly help Sega stand out from its competitors. Because I know even in current day, it's been several years since, I guess we did get the Switch 2, but the PS5 and Xbox One, they've been out for a minute. Sega would really aim for quicker development, not rush development. I want to emphasize that. Um, but just to kind of keep things fresh for their fans and their audience. For these consoles, they would develop a Sega Pass subscription service that would have a full library of all their new and older titles within it, accessible in one location through the subscription service. This subscription service would also be the hub for Sega's online gaming community, making it easy to always play games with others and stay connected within the community. This service would also provide early access to new releases, and DLC content you would originally have to pay for are completely free and included in the subscription. So not only would this online subscription be like the Xbox Live of Sega, having one place to stay connected and game together online with your friends, but it would also be a great way to go back and play older Sega titles and also be the first to play some of the new titles. And in this online subscription, you'd be able to get new releases early and you wouldn't have to buy them separately. So as long as you're paying for this subscription, you will get every new game that they release. And they could even have different levels within the subscription that's like all Sega games, which would definitely be more expensive. Or if there's just specific IPs like Persona or Sonic the Hedgehog, if you only want those new releases, it would be a cheaper model, but you'd get all those new releases as well with the old titles as well. Sega would also seek partnership and create their own esport leagues and tournaments focused on their games and consoles alone. This would be a great way to promote their new games and consoles and their capabilities while also getting more of the community involved. These esport events could also have participants join remotely through online gaming services or the Sega Pass to better show off the communities and products with their online capabilities. This would allow for more people to participate in the esports compared to other esports events where you have to have everybody gather in one location. Sega would also seek even more global headquarters expansion. Having more headquarter locations all around the world can help distribute workloads for their products and can help provide better marketing that is more focused and geared towards different areas around the globe. And because right now, again, I know I mentioned the three Sega headquarter locations currently, but I believe that we could expand this to have multiple locations all around the world. And if we could even get a Sega headquarters in every country, I think that would be very beneficial and would be needed, especially if, we're having all of the Sega Pass online capabilities being worked on all the time, the consoles being newer and wanting to release more frequently, we would definitely have more global headquarters. That way, we could distribute this workload and not have one headquarter be so swarmed with all of that responsibility. So, for a 5 year plan in this new timeline, looking ahead in 5 years, Sega is expected to remain the number one gaming platform globally. And in those 5 years, Sega's online subscription service, the Sega Pass, is estimated to reach over 200 million users, making it a main source of recurring revenue. Sega will use this revenue to invest in a new VR system that has the ability to take any game they have previously released and turn it into a first person VR experience that has never been done before, putting the player into their favorite games and allowing them to play the games in a new way, that being first person, that hasn't been possible until now. Their sponsored esport leagues would grow to rival traditional sports in popularity, especially with having a global audience. Um, and again, that's just that would be a crucial part of the headquarters to help run this and operate this. But with it all being online, you could have such a global audience because you could have players from all around the world not having to meet in just one location. Sega will also continue to expand beyond gaming with even more movies, TV shows, comic book series, and other media based on their famous IPs. Sega will continue to gain more and more confidence as the years go on, leading them to be experimental and try new things more often, like how they did with the online multiplayer and the Dreamcast in the past. An example of this would be to create brand new IPs for players to enjoy and add to their favorite catalog of IPs. Because right now, in the current timeline, Sega kind of just banks on these IPs and trusts them kind of with everything to keep them afloat. But with them being so successful in this alternate timeline, they would be able to shoot for new IPs and just grow that catalog even larger. They will use their position in the mobile gaming market to try out these new ideas or different things, leading to a larger success in the mobile gaming, where eventually they become the number one company in the mobile market too. Overall, in the next 5 years, Sega looks to grow and evolve from not just the top gaming company, but into one of the top full entertainment platforms for all to enjoy. And this ranges from all platforms of the gaming market to all different types of transmedia. Sega will truly excel in the next 5 years from just being a gaming company to being an all-around entertainment powerhouse, kind of in the same way, Disney is or something is like that is today. That would be my plan for Sega in this 5 year timeline, which I believe is very achievable with the success Sega has had in this alternate timeline. And that concludes my alternate history presentation. Thank you for watching and listening. I really enjoyed this presentation as I've grown up a Sega fan my whole life. And it's been hard, watching them struggle in different areas and things like that. So I really enjoyed finding ways or things that I would change throughout their timeline to make Sega more successful. And I guess we can always, think what if these changes in the alternate timeline did actually happen, how things might look different. And if I'm being honest, I think I'm pretty close to how it would actually look. But like I said earlier, Sega's optimistic, at least their investors and things like that are optimistic that within the next 3 years, they will make more of a profit than they currently have been. And with the success of their transmedia and current IPs, they should be better off than they have been. But I don't think they would reach the point of success as I had them in my alternate timeline, which is unfortunate, but made for a great topic for this presentation. So thank you again for watching and listening.